Welcome back to This Explainer. Today, we are stepping directly into a room that has just gone completely, utterly still. Imagine sitting there. A lawyer is looking down at a document, reading aloud, and he says, Lily learned to become invisible because invisibility was safer than disappointment. Just let those words sit in the air for a second. I mean, if you've ever felt sidelined in your own life, you know exactly how heavy that feels. Hearing those exact words read out loud, feeling the hot tears suddenly running down your face, it's the absolutely devastating weight of a truth that is finally being spoken into the quiet of a room.
And that brings us to the title of this deeply personal chapter, Grandma Saw Everything. So often we go through our darkest, most painful moments feeling entirely alone. We convince ourselves that our quiet little struggles are completely invisible to the world. But, as we're about to see, one person was quietly paying attention the entire time.
Section 1, The Invisible Child, A Life Built on Sacrifice. So the lawyer continued reading, and the words just hit like a tidal wave. He read, "You were never difficult, you were never less talented, you were never second best. You simply became the child everyone expected to sacrifice." It's that painful realization of being the one who always had to step aside.
Which, of course, leads us to this massive, lingering question. How had Grandma seen everything when literally nobody else had? How was it even possible that the rest of the family was completely blind to this dynamic, yet she saw it with such crystal clarity? Well, as the tears are falling, the tension in the room shifts. The lawyer reaches into his bag and he pulls out something totally unimaginable.
Section 2, Grandma's Secret Diary, 20 Years of Truth. From his bag, the lawyer pulls out this small, unassuming notebook. Inside, dozens and dozens of handwritten entries dating back nearly 2 decades. Every single birthday, every holiday, every family gathering, she had been secretly writing it all down.
And she wasn't just recording vague feelings here. These were hard, incredibly painful facts. She documented those specific, heartbreaking little moments. The day the bicycle was given to Emma. The afternoon the parents canceled piano lessons. The evening Ryan came to dinner with Emma. These are those sharp, distinct childhood memories that everyone else brushes off as, oh, it's not a big deal. But to the child actually experiencing them, they are monumental, earth-shattering losses.
But guys, it goes even deeper than that. And honestly, it gets even more heartbreaking. She actually documented the conversations she overheard after a child had gone to bed crying. Just try to imagine the deep, sorrowful reality of that. The most private, isolating moments of a child's life. Crying alone in the dark, truly believing the whole world has turned its back on you. But someone was right there, listening on the other side of the door, page after page after page.
Section 3, Proof of the Past, Why She Wrote It. Now, it's so important to understand that she didn't write this out of spite. She didn't do it out of anger at anyone, no. She wrote it all down out of a very real, very specific fear.
See, for years, there had been nothing but internal doubt. That agonizing little voice in your head saying, well, maybe I was just too sensitive. Maybe I exaggerated the whole thing. Maybe none of it was actually as unfair as I remembered. Because when people act like your pain isn't real, you start to gaslight yourself, right? But then, there it was. The absolute truth. This diary answered every single question. You hadn't imagined anything. And the sheer relief of that validation, it's just massive.
Which brings us to the true emotional climax of this entire document, the final diary entry. It was written only 2 weeks before she died. Knowing she was near the very end of her life, she took the time to make absolutely sure this secret 20-year project would find its way to the one person who needed it most. The lawyer read her exact words out loud. One day, Lily will wonder whether she imagined her pain. I mean, to be that fully, deeply understood by another human being, to have someone see your quiet suffering and accurately predict the exact burden you are going to carry into adulthood, it is completely breathtaking. Her entry continued. If that day comes, give her these pages. This wasn't just some scrapbook of memories. This was a literal lifeline thrown deep into the future. It was a grandmother reaching straight through time just to catch her granddaughter exactly when she knew she would be falling. And then he read the very last line. She deserves proof that someone saw her. After an entire lifetime of shrinking down, of feeling completely and utterly invisible, you are suddenly handed undeniable proof that you mattered. You were seen, Every single tear, every unfairness, it was witnessed.
And so we're left with this simple, incredibly warm, and deeply healing truth. Someone had seen you all along. That kind of validation, it can heal a lifetime of invisible wounds. But the lawyer was pulling this diary out of a much larger envelope. There was something else. We're going to explore exactly what else was left behind in our next explainer on the secret letter. But until then, I want to leave you with this. Who is the silent observer in your own family's story? And what truths might they be holding on to?
Welcome to today's explainer. We're exploring a deeply personal story about hidden family truths. And to truly feel its weight, I'll be sharing it directly from the perspective of the one who lived it. The air in the lawyer's office was thick with grief. The reading of the will had been exhausting. And then, the lawyer picked up one final envelope.
This one is for Lily only. As those words hung there in the quiet room, everyone turned and looked at me. You could feel the sudden, intense weight of their stares. I reached out and accepted the envelope, but my hands were trembling so much I could barely even hold the paper.
Right across the front, written in my grandma's familiar, comforting handwriting, were 5 simple words. Open this when you're ready. I didn't open it right then. I just slipped the envelope straight into my purse. Because honestly, I felt completely unready for yet another surprise on a day that had already taken so much out of me.
Part 1. Grandma's Room, an unchanged space.
Later that evening, the quiet of the house was just overwhelming. I walked into Grandma's bedroom, and it was a gentle, wistful shock. Everything was exactly, perfectly as she had left it. There was her knitting basket, sitting quietly beside the rocking chair, just waiting for hands that would never return to it. Her reading glasses were resting exactly where they always did, right there on the nightstand. Seeing them made it feel as though she might just walk through the door at any second to pick them up and read to me.
But what was the most vivid, though, was the scent. Her favorite lavender perfume still lingered softly in the air. Breathing it in, I slowly walked over and sat on the edge of her bed, feeling her presence absolutely everywhere.
Part 2. The hidden photograph. A forgotten memory.
Sitting there in the quiet, I finally felt ready. I took a deep breath, opened my purse, and opened the envelope. But inside wasn't just the handwritten letter I'd expected. There was an old photograph tucked in right beside it. It showed 2 little girls playing in Grandma's backyard. My sister Emma was smiling so brightly. And I was laughing so hard that my eyes were completely closed. Looking at it filled me with a sense of quiet wonder, because it was a beautiful day of pure joy that I didn't even remember happening.
Part 3. The secret letter. The final truth.
Holding that paper, tracing the ink of her handwriting, I braced myself to read the profound, final words my grandma had deliberately left behind for me to find. The letter began, "Dear Lily, if you are reading this, you've already heard the truth everyone else ignored." The isolation in that single sentence was staggering. The truth that everyone else ignored? Then, the entire tone of the letter shifted. She wrote, "But there is one more thing I need you to know. Emma was not born selfish." I literally frowned when I read that line. I was genuinely shocked and confused, because that was absolutely not what I expected to hear. It went against everything I had ever believed about my sister. Part 4. A terrible mistake. The shift in attention. This is where my entire understanding of my childhood shifted, uncovering a profound psychological reality. It contradicted the Emma everyone knew, that deeply ingrained belief that she was simply a selfish person. Grandma's heartbreaking revelation showed the real Emma. She wasn't selfish. Before I was born, she was simply deeply terrified of being forgotten. For a time, Emma had been the first child, the first granddaughter. She was the sole focus of the family's universe. Then, day 1, I arrived. And in the following months, suddenly and entirely, everyone's attention shifted away from her and onto me. And here is the true tragedy of the story. Instead of helping Emma adjust, instead of guiding a little girl through a terrifying new reality where she felt she was being replaced, Grandma's letter reveals that the adults made a terrible mistake. Which leaves us with one haunting question as we wrap up this explainer. What exactly was that terrible mistake? That is the missing piece of the puzzle we are left desperate to uncover.
Hello and welcome back to The Explainer. Today, we're walking through a remarkably profound turning point in a narrative I know so many of you have been following closely. We're looking at part 15, The Truth About Emma. Honestly, I'd invite you to just settle in for this one because what we're looking at today is a deeply personal, incredibly raw psychological reveal. It all centers around a single letter. A letter from a grandmother that just completely unravels years and years of quiet misunderstandings and long-held family resentments. It's really a story about realizing that the roles we play in our families aren't always the ones we chose for ourselves. So let's just dive right into this letter and see what it uncovers.
I want to start right here with this incredibly powerful quote. The adults had trained both of us. Just take a second and think about your own childhood memories. How often do we look back and just assume that a sibling was, born that way, that they were just naturally difficult or selfish or quiet? Well, this letter flips that assumption entirely on its head. It drops us into the staggering realization that, without even knowing it, the adults in their lives had actively, albeit unconsciously, conditioned both sisters into the people they became. And to truly grasp this, we have to look at the hidden root causes behind Emma's behavior.
Section 1. The Childhood Dynamic.
Grandma's letter systematically breaks down this psychological training, and honestly, it is heartbreaking to see it laid out so plainly. You can see the exact pattern here. First, whenever Emma cried, the adults just gave her what she wanted. Second, whenever she got jealous, they rewarded her, literally just to stop the conflict. And third, whenever Emma demanded something that actually belonged to the narrator, the adults didn't correct Emma. Nope, they turned to the narrator and asked her to be the good child. They systematically conditioned them. Unearned rewards for one child and forced quiet sacrifices for the other.
Section 2. Entitlement and Invisibility.
This relentless cycle of rewards and sacrifices leads to a really devastating conclusion about what these kids were actually being taught. On one side, Emma learned that taking brought immediate rewards. She was taught entitlement. On the other side, the narrator learned that giving up, basically surrendering her own needs, was the only way to earn approval. She was taught invisibility. But what hits so hard here is Grandma's explicit realization. She wrote, "Neither of you deserved that." Emma was robbed of the chance to learn empathy, and the narrator was robbed of her voice. Neither child deserved that fate.
Section 3. The Truth Revealed.
Armed with this new context, we reach a pivotal moment. For years, the narrator believed one simple, painful thing, that Emma was just cruel. But now, she saw something entirely different. Yes, Emma made terrible choices, but those terrible choices were actively encouraged by the exact people who should have corrected her. The adults enabled the cruelty. They paved the road for it. And that's such a heavy realization, isn't it? That the person hurting you was really just following the script they were handed.
Section 4. Redefining forgiveness. This brings us to a part of the text that will absolutely resonate with anyone who has struggled with a painful past. Grandma's letter offers a path forward by redefining forgiveness. She writes, "Forgiveness is not pretending the past never happened." So often, we're told to just forgive and forget, right? As if wiping the slate clean is the only way to heal. But this beautifully refutes that. Moving forward doesn't mean erasing history. It definitely doesn't mean invalidating the very real pain you went through. Instead, the letter offers this defining statement. Forgiveness is refusing to let the past decide who you become. It's just a brilliant illustration of taking back control. You're choosing to step out of that invisible role you were assigned. You are refusing to let old wounds dictate your future identity. And then, the letter leaves her with this final, stunning piece of advice. But please don't spend your future trying to win a competition that should never have existed. After reading those words, the narrator carefully folded the letter. And in that quiet moment, something shifted. For the very first time, all that burning, lifelong anger was just gone. It was replaced simply by sadness. A really quiet, profound grief for the childhoods that both she and Emma had lost to this artificial competition. Section 5. An Unexpected Arrival. And it's right in that exact moment of vulnerable clarity, when the anger has finally washed away, that the narrative pivots. The text sets the scene so simply. Just as she finishes folding the letter, the narrator notes, "Then I heard footsteps outside." It was Emma, the very person she had just spent this entire emotional journey rethinking, standing right there on the porch. And we're left with this final, lingering image. She was holding an old cardboard box. After all this time,
After all the conditioning, what has Emma brought to the porch? We're left with a hint that part 16 will feature Emma finally apologizing, but we are absolutely desperate to know the details. What do you think is in that box? And more importantly, do you think the narrator is finally ready to open it? Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. I really hope this deep dive helped illuminate the psychological layers of this story for you. See you next time.
Welcome to today's explainer. We're diving right in today because we're exploring something incredibly personal. I'm going to unpack a profound life experience with you. We'll walk step by step through a story about family, deep-seated rivalry, and the literal psychological weight of the things we hold on to. This isn't just about a sibling conflict, It's a look at the anatomy of an apology and the true cost of always needing to win. I want you to picture sitting on a quiet porch, the air just heavy with years of unspoken words, as we go through this journey together.
It all started with a simple cardboard box. Emma walked up to my porch and she handed it to me. Her voice was so quiet, she just looked at me and said, "I found these in my attic." You could practically feel the hesitation hanging in the air. There was no grand entrance, no loud announcement, just a quiet surrender of a box that had been hidden away for years, covered in the dust of our shared past.
Section 1. The Box of Memories, a Hidden Past. When someone hands you a piece of your past, you don't just open it, you brace yourself. What was inside this box wasn't just old junk. It was a carefully preserved collection of lost time. Literally, a physical manifestation of memories that had inexplicably gone missing so many years ago. Inside that box was a totally random yet deeply significant collection of my life. Things I hadn't seen in years. The silver bell from my pink bicycle. My absolute favorite stuffed rabbit. A friendship bracelet I'd carefully knotted together back in the 4th grade. The blue sketchbook that I honestly thought was lost forever. And even the tiny seashell necklace that Ryan had given me long before everything fell apart. Seeing them all together, it brought back the exact sinking feeling of losing every single one of them.
As I was just staring at these pieces of my childhood, Emma whispered this confession. She said, "I kept them. I don't even know why." The confusion in her voice was so genuine. It wasn't malicious, not in that moment. It was the sound of someone who had been operating on a painful, unconscious script for her entire life, finally looking at the evidence of her own actions and just not understanding the stranger who committed them.
Section 2. Uncovering the Hidden Truth. Emma's motivation.
See, hoarding someone else's memories isn't really about the objects themselves. It's about what those objects represent. I had to know the underlying reason behind this lifelong sibling rivalry. I looked right at her, and I asked the one question that had been haunting me. Why did you really take everything? She didn't answer right away. The gravity of that question just hung heavily in the air between us. She slowly sat down on the porch steps, gathering the courage to finally speak the truth.
When she finally spoke, her words totally shattered the armor we'd both been wearing for decades. She said, "When we were kids, I thought if people loved you, they would stop loving me. Hearing that, it just breaks your heart." Suddenly, I remembered Grandma's letter, and all the pieces started falling into place. It was the sudden, agonizing understanding of a child's flawed logic. In Emma's mind, love wasn't infinite. It was a finite resource, and every drop of affection I received was a drop she felt she was losing.
She kept going, explaining the heartbreaking root of it all. So every time you loved something, I convinced myself I needed it more. It's just a devastating cycle of jealousy. And you want to know the bitterest irony of all? She gave this incredibly bitter, hollow smile and told me that the strangest part was that none of it ever made her happy. Stealing my joy never actually filled her own emptiness.
Section 3. The Heavy Cost of Winning. The Fallout and Loss.
Emma's need to take, her need to possess what others loved, it didn't stop in childhood. It bled right into her adult life, turning into a compulsion that took a devastating toll on her personal world. It is just so incredibly heavy to look back on. Emma ruined almost every relationship she ever had. Ryan left her after 2 years together, and his reason? He said she always needed to win. Then her fiancé ended their engagement, and over the years, her closest friends just slowly disappeared. Her behavior compounded, layer by layer, loss by loss, until the people who tried to love her were completely driven away. And I believed her when she told me this, because despite all of her external success, sitting there on the porch steps, she looked completely broken. She said, "I spent my whole life collecting things, and somehow ended up completely alone." It is a profound, crushing realization. She had built a fortress out of stolen victories and taken treasures, only to realize it was actually a prison.
Section 4. A plea for sisterhood. A fragile step.
But from that total despair, the narrative actually shifts. Once you hit rock bottom and the truth is laid entirely bare, there's finally room for something else, something warm, a very fragile, cautious step toward emotional resolution. She looked up at me, and there were tears welling in her eyes. Her vulnerability in this moment was absolute. She told me, I know saying sorry isn't enough. It never will be. And she was right. A simple apology cannot instantly fix a lifetime of damage, of missing memories, and broken trust. But the fact that she acknowledged it, that she wasn't demanding instant absolution, it completely changed the energy on that porch.
And then she offered this final plea. But if there's even a tiny chance, I'd like to try being your sister. It was delivered with such desperate sincerity, just a delicate, hopeful offering from someone who had finally stopped trying to win and was instead just asking to belong.
Which leads us with a really difficult question. Can a lifetime of betrayal truly be forgiven in a single moment? It's a huge question of human nature, of healing, and of boundaries. And I will tell you this, I didn't forgive her immediately. The damage was way too deep for a quick fix. But the door had finally been opened. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep reflecting on this, and I'll see you in the next chapter as we explore exactly what happened next.
Do you remember this? I thought I lost it forever. It's still here, everything. Thank you. Thank you for showing me.